Guys, I wanted to make a video today of my truck. I hadn't made a video in a while, so I figured people might be interested to see what I built. So we started out with a Suburban. I bought it. It had 280 on it kilometers, and I took the 6.2 liter diesel out of it. Drove it for a year, and I took the 6.2 diesel out of it, and I actually swapped in a 7.3 liter Powerstroke out of an E350 van. A 1995 E350 van. So there it is. There. Front fender wells are tubbed out. The back frame is notched along with the floor. It's got a 14 bolt 9.5 inch ring gear out of a diesel half ton, 1998 Chevy diesel half ton. The front is converted with swap rotors from, I can't remember where they were from, but when I got them they had 7/16 studs in them, so I actually drilled them out. Now the front and back have M14 studs in it. We're running a 305/40 in the back and a 265/35 in the front. Believe it or not, it'll still spin that, even though the motor's stock. And all I have on it is just a Hydra tuner. So far it's been great. It's got almost 12,000 kilometers on it. I haven't had any issue where it's actually left me on the side of the road. I've gotten up to 24 miles to the gallon, cruising at about 80-90 kilometers an hour. It's a little harder in town when you're driving it like you stole it. It gets around 15 or so, but if you're on the highway, being that the rear gear is actually a 342, it gets a really good mileage for, you know, a big old brick cruising down the road. The front is lowered with a 3-inch drop spindle and a 1-inch spring. The back is lowered obviously with a flip and a notch. Funny enough, when I took the truck to be aligned about a week ago, and never touched the suspension since the 6.2, and the camber was actually exactly the same. So the difference in weight to me can't be, you know, all that different, but maybe it is. Who knows? What else we got here? So the overflow I did kind of as a joke. I used a gas tank because it's a diesel. Inside here, this little edgeware tin here, if I can get it open, I actually wired it so that you can still see the odometer and the trip meter, so I know how many kilometers are racking up on the motor. When I got the motor, it only had 150,000 kilometers on it, which is about 90k miles on it. Obviously runs great, starts up every morning. What else? It's got factory power windows, power locks, power rear window. It's very loud. I'm running a 5-inch straight 5-inch turndown with a mbrp muffler. So inside the dash here, I've got my odometer boost gauge and odometer water temperature. I actually, when I first built the truck, built it in integrating the stock gauges, but I found the stock coolant temperature gauge to be pretty unreliable, and it's something that you don't really want to screw around with. So instead, I made them fit in behind the stock location. Boost gauge needs a little bit better fitment, and so does, and turned a bit, but they work great. What else? The tuner I put right here. So if you turn the key on, the glow plug light and everything comes on the way it should. And then you have the tuner here where you can change the tunes on the fly. So I think there's 14 tunes on there or whatever. You know, I really only use about 4 or 5, but I just, when I loaded the tunes from my laptop onto the computer, I just loaded whatever I could just to try them all out. I'm using a B&M Unimatic shifter just because I didn't want to try and make the linkage work with the E4OD transmission and the Chevy linkage. I would have loved to use the column linkage, but I just didn't have the time to try and, you know, figure it out. So this was the easiest way. You could order a kit that made their shifters work on the E4OD, and that was what I did. So I'm running the 14 bolt rear end, the actual Ford drive shaft out of the van, cut down, and the E4OD trans out of the Ford van, obviously. I actually had to make a reluctor ring for a speed input for the transmission for it to shift properly, because the speed sensor in the Ford was actually in the rear end. So I did a little bit of math, figured out how many per drive shaft rotation, how many times it counts pulse, and then I actually made a ring that sits on the drive shaft yoke that has, I think it had, I can't remember, 22 magnets in it or something like that, and then I mounted the sensor to the top of the rear end, and it counts as it goes around, and I've actually had no issues with that. It shifts perfect, the same as it would as if it was in the Ford truck. Beyond that, I got a little bit more work to do on the headliner here. My goal for this winter is I want to get the AC working and actually take all these signs down and put some kind of dynamat in behind there or something, because it's very tinny in here when you're driving. Yeah, if you guys like what you see, I think I'll probably end up putting a driving video up. And like, comment, just subscribe.